Hello, everybody. This is Matt Williamson of Pop Goes the 60s, and today I have John Heaton with me, and we are continuing our series of solo Beatle reviews. And today we're going to review the Ringo album from 1973. Welcome, John.
Hi, folks. How's it going?
Well, we kind of went back and forth on what Ringo album to do, and we initially I said, well, this one's kind of the obvious one and maybe the cliched one, but I couldn't bring myself to review any of the others. So we said, let's do the Ringo album.
Yep, good one to start with.
So this was easily Ringo's biggest hit of his career in music, film, and anything really. And it hit #2 in the United States on Billboard, kept from the #1 spot by Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and it managed to get #7 in the UK. And it was generally a hit all over. And it's his first, I guess, proper studio album after having done 2 albums of covers. And I think it was good timing for him.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why he disowns the first two, or not disowns, but not as much as he disowns the later records from the 70s. But he said they didn't count because they're covers albums. But everyone's doing covers albums these days, and I don't think it's unnatural for Ringo to do it, given that he's not a prolific songwriter anyway. He'd normally be doing 75% covers anyway on a record.
Yeah, I think Buku's of Blues is a really good listen. I think he was on the right track when he did that album. Obviously, he likes country. He had a great band, and it's his most consistently sounding and even album I think he's ever done, really.
Yep, it's a joy.
One of the things about Ringo, 1973 is kind of the end of his higher profile film career. I think we'll see with Ringo here, this was such a strong album for him. He kind of fell off the film thing, and I don't know if that he tried to just be the recording guy, which didn't think really suited him as well. So we could talk about that. But have you seen a lot of his films? Those early films?
Uh, I've got Caveman, but I can't get more than 10 minutes through it without giving up. So bad. I've watched That'll Be the Day the other day.
Hmm.
It's tremendously dated in terms of using risque, sort of semi-offensive language, etc., etc. It's just the way things were in the 50s. I think the phrase I came up with was "It's Grease without the hits."
Yes. Well, then the thing with That'll Be the Day, I mean, there's this 1950s revival in the 70s, and that fit right in with that, with, American Graffiti and then Happy Days and
Yeah.
on all that stuff. So his timing was good with this album. And we'll see a little bit about how it worked on the charts. So this is produced by Richard Perry. And this is probably the reason this album gets all the attention, I think, has to do with the other 3 Beatles participating on it. Although the one that I mean, the Harrison's contributions are huge. The other 2, not so much, but they're there. So that always kind of artificially elevates this album, I think.
Well, you can say artificially, but it's very heartwarming to see all 4 Beatles appear on a record, especially given all the angst following the split and all the bitching in public. It was really, well, I was too young to see it at the time, but I imagine at the time it must have been very refreshing to see them all coming together, as it were.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably, I was too young as well, but maybe some people in the comments who lived through this can give us their impression of their involvement and what that meant to them after all that bad press and the nasty breakup stuff.
Yep.
Well, let me read a review here. A couple notable ones here. Lorraine Alterman of the New York Times described it as an instant knockout, a sensational album. And then Ben Gerson of Rolling Stone said that on one hand, Starr's limited artistry and the abundance of Starr's guest stars made the album rambling and inconsistent. Yet, in terms of atmosphere, Ringo is the most successful record by any ex-Beatle. It's not a polemical and abrasive like Lennon's, harsh and self-pitying like Harrison's, or precious and flimsy like McCartney's, but balanced, airy, and amiable. So this album is definitely airy and amiable. I certainly agree with that.
Yeah, it's a little bit lazy journalism that, dismissing Harrison in 2 words and Lennon similarly. I mean, and by any objective standards, Lennon and Harrison had already produced masterpieces
Yeah.
by this stage. So anyway,
Well, yeah, you could tell the journalism. I mean, he's just trying to set this one so much aside, and does so by exaggeration. You see that a lot in a lot of the rock journalism.
yeah,
And yeah, because this album, I have never taken Ringo very seriously. I expect an album like this from him. And I think most people do. They're not expecting a Plastic Ono Band or a Ram or an All Things Must Pass. They're expecting this Ringo 73 album, which Ringo does best, kind of tongue in cheek, step lightly, that's Ringo.
well, I mean, when you say expect, I certainly don't expect anything from him these days. I haven't done for the last 30 years, really. But yeah, during the 70s, he put out a sequence of, happy-go-lucky albums that cheer you up. And whereas his recent records to me just are so unilayered, they just don't do anything for me. So I've got so low expectations now of Ringo's new output that, I'm bound to be impressed.
Yeah, I think in Ringo's 70s output, I think he was somewhat beholden to the times because he wasn't a songwriter. And in
Yeah.
some cases, he deferred to the, I guess, heavy-handed production styles of the day, and I think that never served him well.
You're having a dig at Arif Mardin here, aren't you?
No, not really. I actually like a Riff Martin, but I'm having a dig at. We'll talk about Vinnie Poncia a little bit because he's made some poor collaborations, and this album kind of calls us out a little bit. This is a great example of what he could have done with his career and what he maybe shouldn't have done, because there's a lot of successes here, but also a couple of stinkers as well. But I guess it gets off to a great start with a Mr. Lennon song. How do you like I'm the Greatest, John?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely can understand why Lennon didn't want to record this for himself. Absolutely the right choice to give it to Ringo. No one's going to get upset if Ringo sings I'm the Greatest. He can get away with it. Superb lithograph from Klaus Forman showing Ringo on the top of the Nelson's column like statue with his fists clenched. It's great. Yeah, just wonderful to see 3 Beatles in the studio together or hear them, and with Billy Preston on hand as well. Klaus and Richard Perry talks about it quite a bit in his memoirs. Just a magical atmosphere that day when John and Ringo were already laying down the track, and then George came on the telephone and said, "Can I come down?" Lennon said, "Sure. Help me finish this bridge."
Well, I think Harrison's contribution is one of his best solos too, and I think this is a little bit of an underrated solo track. I just think it's fun. It's a good track, and the one thing that John Lennon's music lacked, I think, in the first few albums is the humor. And
Yeah,
I wouldn't have minded Lennon doing this song because I mean I would get it. I mean you kind of understand his humor a bit, and obviously works great for Ringo.
yeah. I mean, he could have done it himself, but I'm not aware of a studio demo of this of "I'm the Greatest." To you, I know you mentioned you thought it was from the Imagined Sessions, but
Yeah, I do have a version of "I'm the Greatest" by John Lennon.
is it
It's
a home demo?
it's not a home demo. No, it's a full band rehearsal. It might have been from these sessions. Actually, I'm not sure when it was.
Oh well, I think well if is it on a bootleg? I think you might have the early run through when he's got George and Ringo with him. No, in March '73.
Yeah, the version I have, I don't know where I got it from, but I assumed it was the band run through that he did with the Ringo sessions
Yeah,
because it sounds
yeah,
very similar. And he's maybe doing a guide vocal and just leading them through the song. And his very casual vocal is just so fun. Lennon, um, I play that version quite a bit actually.
Yeah, and I love his harmony vocal on the finished version. You know, when he comes in with "And now I'm a man, a woman took me by the hand." A very distinctive Lennon
Hmm.
harmony.
People talk about John Lennon's lead vocals and him being a great vocalist, which is true, but he cuts through on harmony. You could tell it's him. He's got a very unique voice, and he's a
Yeah,
very well-suited harmony singer.
I agree.
All right, we got song number two of side one, "Have You Seen My Baby," the Randy Newman song. And this is with Mark Bolan playing on it. It reminds me, I mean, the riff is similar to Bang a Gong, Get It On. And how do you like this song, John?
I adore this song. I think it's great.
Randy Newman has never been a guy that I've really warmed up to, but in Ringo's hands, this is just a light and kind of fun song. And again, not to be taken too seriously. And I think the guitar is good. It Bolan's guitar sounds more raw, which is not the type of production Ringo goes for. But we see that in this album a little bit. I think that's what makes this album successful.
I mean, it's a little bit repetitive, isn't it, with the hold-ons and stuff, but that's
Yeah,
fairly minor criticism.
yeah, I thought the song should have been called "Hold On" because that's what he keeps saying through the song, and I keep getting the song confused because it's called "Have You Seen My Baby?" So I
Doesn't it
think,
have hold on in brackets?
yeah, at least that would help because it always confuses me a bit. But yeah. So the next song we have the first single that was released for the album, which was probably the wisest release, and that's "Photograph." And
Yeah.
I've done some surveys on my channel with regard to Beatles solo stuff, and this ranks extremely high with fans as being one of the top songs. And obviously, with Harrison's collaboration, it's like a Beatles song.
Yeah, it's very interesting to compare this to the material George was doing on his own Material World LP, which was it was altogether more solemn, serious affair, spiritual. And this one is a kind of Harrison's more melodic side, um, and also uplifting melody, even though the lyrics are depressing as hell, obviously. Um, but it sounds very Harrison-esque in the chord sequences. I'm guessing Ringo probably helped write the words and George did most of the music, if I had to guess.
Mhm.
But wonderful song. And another, talk about harmony singing. George is very distinctive on this one, as Lennon had been on the first track. So that's very interesting to see as well.
Yeah, I can imagine fans listening to this album just being thrilled to hear so much voice in the other Beatles so far, just
Yeah.
in three tracks in.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the lyrics of this song, yeah, they are sad and melancholy, but still beautiful and uplifting. Harrison has a way of doing that at times, and this song, you wonder what it would have been like if he had it on Material World. Maybe he would thought of doing it himself, but he's pretty unselfish when it comes to Ringo, and it makes me wonder why didn't these guys write together more? Even in the Beatles, I mean, Harrison needed a writing partner. Him and Ringo could have been sitting down, meeting at each other's houses, and going, creating songs. It seems like when they do get together, there's some very positive stuff that gets done. They could have done some joint albums in the 70s, and that way not all the pressure is on one of them.
Yeah. It's one of those things we'll never know. Um, by the way, there's a dreadful promo video to this song. I don't know if you've seen it, but so James Griffiths and I are writing a book actually on the Beatles solo promo videos. So we've been watching all the early ones, and this
Okay.
one we couldn't find a good word to say about it. It's Ringo just wandering around his Tittenhurst Park estate, shooting moose with a rifle, and there's a girl sitting on a chair behind an empty picture frame, and that's supposed to denote photograph.
Well, you have to wonder what was Ringo thinking. Here he's a guy who's supposedly an actor and has an interest in film, and yet doesn't take the opportunity to do anything special off of these promo films. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't always the case, but this is a particularly bad one.
Yeah, I guess we do see some nasty ones in the 70s. It wasn't quite MTV yet, so you do run into these awful ones. I guess that's I've never seen that one, so I'll have to check it out.
Well, I would recommend you check out several others before you check out that one.
Well, quickly tell us about the book with you and James Griffiths. I didn't know you were writing one. That's
Yeah,
really
we've got most of the way through the 70s already. We've been sort of watching five at a time and doing commentary, and James has been writing up our commentary, and then we have a little section about what is this video, what about the song, what was happening at the time, and yeah, we've covered all of George's 70s promos, most of John's. He didn't do many. Most of Ringo's and most of Wings. So I think we got some of the Back to the Egg ones to do still. But it's been a labor of love, you know.
oh, cool. Yeah, I've only seen some here and there, but it's nobody's ever compiled them as far as I can tell. That's a really great idea.
Yeah, I mean it'll take a while to write, so don't expect it too soon. But hoping to have it out by Christmas.
That's pretty quick, actually.
Well, I don't know
Impressive.
about that. Maybe a bit longer. It depends. But we're on a bit of a roll at the moment, so we'll see.
Well, very good. Well, congratulations on that, and we'll tap you for more information as we get closer to the publishing.
Yep,
Okay,
yep.
great, great. Okay, we have another Harrison song here, "Sunshine Life for Me," and I know that's not a favorite of yours. One of the things that I noticed, it's got that country flavor to it, and I think it's suitable for Ringo on this album.
Yeah, I mean he's got the band playing along with him, hasn't he? It's I don't think he sings it very well. George is again supplying decent harmony or even jointly singing the lead. But I just does nothing for me this song. I find it a bit boring, to be honest.
Hey, you know, let me just backtrack. I was going to make a comment on the sax solo by Bobby Keys on Photograph. One of the things that I noticed when the Beatles gathered, the ex solo Beatles, meaning George, John, and Ringo, they usually use a lot of the same guys on their sessions. And when Bobby Keys plays his sax solo um, on the solo Beatles stuff, it never sounds as good as what he plays on the Stones. You know, I don't know if you've ever noticed it. I just find that some of his Bobby Keys' work is wasted on some of these solo albums. It's the solos just kind of stop the song dead in its tracks. That's the one thing I don't like about Photograph is that solo.
Well, that's interesting because I think he's just done a solo to match the style of the song. I agree. It's not as gritty as what he was doing on Exile in Main Street, um, but it plays a nice melody. I quite like it. I mean, maybe Tom Scott could have done a better solo, perhaps. We'll never know, but it's never been a problem for me.
Okay. All right. Well, excellent song, no matter what. And it was a number one song. So that was the lead single, hit number one in several markets, and rightfully so. One of the great solo Beatles singles of all time.
Yeah.
Okay, we talked about Sunshine Life for Me. So the next song, finishing off side one, is You're 16. And when I was growing up, this is the Ringo song that I heard the most on the radio. This is the song I kind of identified with Ringo. Another number one song, smash hit. So when you look at Sunshine Life for Me, which is kind of a homage to his Bukus of Blues album, which is a country style song, here we see him going back to the standards with Your 16, which is an homage to his Sentimental Journey album. So he's kind of giving us quite a variety here, and he nails it in this one. I mean, this song could have been on Sentimental Journey and released as a single, could have been the number one song that would have catapulted that album into kind of a star or a hit, essentially.
But it's a newer song than the Sentimental Journey stuff, surely, isn't it? You're
Correct.
16.
I'm surprised he didn't try to do something similar on Sentimental Journey, where he would have had a single that possibly could have been a hit to support the album. And I'm surprised he went back to that for this, but it completely suited him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was Richard Perry who probably chose it. I'm not sure. By the way, you know the background why Richard Perry met Ringo. He was doing the Nielsen album, Son of Schmielsen, the previous year, '72, and Ringo was drumming on that, so that's where they hooked up. Anyway, but back to your 16, little story for you. Ringo Starr, Hammersmith Odeon, 1992, front row, John Heaton. Ringo comes down to the front of the stage. John Heaton sticks out his hand. Ringo takes my hand and dances with me for 3 seconds
Oh, really?
during your 16. Yeah.
Oh, is that great? I mean, Ringo, not long after that, he got into his more germaphobe, where he was not shaking hands with anybody. So that's quite
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, I was. You can imagine how chuffed I was. I mean, nowadays he won't even sing. He won't even sing the song because it's not viewed as politically correct or whatever. But back then in '92, he was still doing it. Um, I forget who was in his all-star band. I think Joe Walsh was in the band. I can't remember anyone else. But yeah, I love the version on the record. Again, competition for who can do the best backing vocals. Enter the stage Harry Nilsson,
Mm.
and just wonderful backing vocals, almost steals the show.
Well, here's a quote from Cashbox saying Ringo's version, fantastic and perfect for the '70s, going on to say that it's not only a perfect vocal and steady, but this delightful, easygoing rocker, but the music is a perfect complement. So I think sings it so well. It is the right range for him. And sometimes that range is a problem for Ringo on a lot of these songs. Not these particular, but just in his solo career because he just doesn't have range.
Yeah, it's just perfect choice for him in every way, and a great, really well played by the band of musicians. And Paul McCartney's on hand to do the mouth sax solo as well. So I
Uh,
guess this one's probably recorded. That probably means it was recorded in England. Although I don't think Paul. I think Paul did his contributions in England as opposed to LA, but I'm not sure if he just overdubbed a mouth sax solo onto a pre-recorded version. Maybe that was what happened
yeah,
here.
good question, because this was recorded Apple and EMI in London, Sunset Sound and A&M in Burbank. So yeah, I don't know. Probably, yeah. Well, yeah, McCartney he couldn't get into the country because of the drug busts, so that would have been in London.
Yeah, I'll just in the meantime I'll just look it up in the Terry Wilson book. Have you got this four sides of the circle?
I do not have that.
It covers the years 70 to 74, and it's really good book. It's kind of in the style of Ian McDonald, Revolution in the Head. Yeah, it says here the finishing touches were added in an all-night session in London during work on 6 o'clock, in which McCartney went to lengths to effect a vocal saxophone solo by singing through a processing unit with fuzz tone, which merely ended up making him sound like a kazoo. Well, it's still effective anyway.
Yeah,
Richard Perry rated this as the best performance of Starr's career.
and that was your 16.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say that's ranks up there. I mean, it's well produced and it just seems perfect, and I can see why it hit number one. And so Ringo, by virtue of having two number ones in a row, has become a superstar. I mean, two number ones typically catapults you into a level that's very coveted and very rare. And there was another hit to come as we turn it over and listen to side two. The opening track is "Oh My My."
which reached the top five as well. So at this stage, he was literally outselling his fellow Beatles.
Yeah,
It,
that's everyone. Nobody was matching Starr's chart success, and I think that's ironic. But I can see why though, because and this song is a perfect example. This is a song I don't like. I can see why it was a hit. It was top five in the States.
yeah,
Um, this is the first collaboration Ringo brings on Vinnie Poncia. This is one of two songs he has with him co-writing on this album. Hansi would figure to be a bigger collaborator in upcoming albums. And this, I guess you call this, glam meets bubblegum, a rather inane song, but there was a lot of that going on in the early 70s. This was the age of the novelty song, and I can see why this song hit.
All right. Well, all I can say is Ringo's done a hell of a lot worse than this track in his career. If you hate this one, God knows what you're going to make of his later stuff. Um, I think it's a jolly upbeat track. I like the way the piano, it starts off with the pounding piano, um, amusing, self-deprecating lyrics. Um, and going back to our backing vocal competition, enter Vinny doing quite distinctive backing vocals on the chorus, which I think are quite effective.
Yeah, this is one of those songs where I never really cared for the lyrics. I thought you bring on a writer, you can do better than "Can you boogie? Can you slide?" It's just like, ouch. But it's a fun song. Like I say, there was a lot of this type of music in the top 40 in the States anyway. A lot of novelty songs that were hitting. And I consider this a borderline novelty song. And again, Ringo could get away with it because people didn't take him seriously. He had humor. And I think that's why the song charted so high, along with the
Do
momentum of the first
you
few.
remember watching the Tom Snyder interview with Lennon on the Tonight Show?
Yeah.
Um, and he said, "Oh, this Ringo's album's full of oldies," and he says, "You're 16," and he goes, "Oh my," and Lennon said, "Is that an oldie? I thought Ringo wrote that." So Tom Snyder obviously thought it was a classic from the 50s or something.
Yeah, maybe so. Well, of course, some of that old stuff was being revived. Remember the song where you had like "My Ding-a-Ling" and stuff like that, but then the other song "Shaving Cream," remember that one?
No,
That's
was
like
that
it
who
was an
did
old
that?
like humor song from the 30s that got re-released in the 70s, and you just all these type of like "Sister Mary Elephant" by Cheech and Chong, "Basketball Jones," "Disco Convoy," "King Tut." These are all huge hits. My Dingling was number one, for God's sakes. It's incredible what was going on in the 70s. And I happened to live through the 70s, so people can't tell me, Matt, you weren't there. You can't talk on this. And I was there. I remember this stuff. And a lot of my
I'm not
friends,
sure if they were hits in the States, but there was a band in England called Shawaddy Waddy who had hit after hit of just doing doo wop 50s songs. I don't think they wrote a single tune, but they had a sort of good backing vocal section and a good guy on bass vocal, and yeah, that it was just right for the time, I guess. I mean, love it or hate it, it was very successful.
yeah, and I always felt this was kind of son of Back Off Boogaloo. Those songs are kind of similar in that kind of glammy sound, that heavy style production.
Well, although Back Off Boogaloo doesn't really have a tune, does it? It's a bit tuneless. I mean, the best thing about that song is the pounding drums.
Yeah.
Apparently, when they did an earlier demo of that song, it was pretty lifeless.
Mm. Well, this song again here, I'm going to bring up the sax solo, and when I hear Keys doing solos on these solo Beatles songs, they all sound the same to me. Because I still can't get his Brown Sugar solo out of my head. So I think "Oh My" is way too long. I mean, if it could have been 2 minutes 45 seconds, I think I would have liked it better than. I think it was about 4 minutes, but I'm counting the seconds on this one. So first,
Yeah, it doesn't say the length here. Does it say the length on the record sleeve? Probably does,
let
doesn't
me
it?
see on. I've got it open here. I might be able to find it. 4:16, 4 minutes 16 seconds. And generally, pop songs were getting longer by the 70s anyway. You had longer fade outs, maybe longer intros. They were branching out, and you very seldom, you didn't have a lot of 2 minutes and 30-second singles as much as you had in the 60s, but you had
So
some.
you reckon American DJs were kind of fading it out halfway through on this track?
No, I think American DJs love longer tracks because, longer trips to the bathroom, more time to snort their coke. All right, so we go from "Oh My" to "Step Lightly." Now this, I love this song. Now, to me, I wish Ringo could have done an album in the style of Step Lightly. It's a little more stripped back. You know, you don't have the heavy layers of production that he typically ends up falling into to maybe compensate for either lack of tune or his vocal styling. But this is a fun song, and he wrote this himself.
Yeah, I think it's the best song he's ever written in his whole career, including Octopus's Garden. I think it's just wonderful. Could have could have easily been on the White Album actually if he'd written it at that time.
And when I hear him do these songs and I look in the credits, I say, yeah, he wrote this by himself. I always think, boy, I wish him and Harrison would have just collaborated more. I think there would have could have been something there. But I mean, Ringo, if he really worked on it, he probably could come up with a step lightly each album, which he doesn't really do. I mean, it's not easy to do, but if he maybe had put
No.
into it, I never really got the feeling that Ringo worked real hard on the craft of either writing, singing. There's only so much you could do, you know.
Yeah, nice clarinets here. They're uncredited, but they're arranged by Tom Scott. But I think they work really well, and I like the tapping Ringo's tapping shoes as well. I think they're quite amusing.
Mhm. Okay, we go to Beatle number 3 here. The McCartney's writing 6 o'clock, and we have the official third or fourth Beatle, I guess you'd say, as a part of these proceedings. And it's a nice song. I think it would have been better done by McCartney. It doesn't seem to fit on the album as well for me, but it's a nice enough song.
6 o'clock, yeah, wonderful melody. Uh, I think this song could have easily fitted on Red Rose Speedway. It's kind of a similar mood and very melodic, as is a lot of that album for me. Um, well suited to Ringo's vocal range. I think they did the right thing to cut it when they did, as opposed to the extended fade out, which you can hear on the Goodnight Vienna CD, which just goes on. To your point, that it goes on way too long. So that I think did the right thing to cut it. Um, okay, this sentimental as hell, this song, but I love it.
Yeah, I agree. This could have been on Red Rose Speedway. I think McCartney, I got the feeling that unlike maybe a Harrison song that he wrote for Ringo or Lennon giving a song to Ringo, it didn't seem like Paul wrote this for Ringo. It seemed to be a track already written, then he gave to Ringo. That's what it sounds like to me. So maybe that's why it doesn't
Well,
get pulled
if
off.
that's the case, Matt, then why haven't we heard a version of Paul singing the lead vocal? Because we've had the Red Rose Speedway archive edition, and it's not on there.
Mm,
It's not never surfaced on any bootleg, from what I can remember or what I've seen. Um, I don't suppose it took Paul very long to compose a song like this. I think he can knock these kind of songs out pretty easily, or he could then.
yeah.
Um, as far as I know, it was written specially, but I can't say definitively. No.
Yeah, that's a guess on my part. I didn't
Yeah.
know. And if you say there isn't an archive version of him doing a guide vocal or something, yeah, probably he did write it for Ringo. Because Paul, he did so much recording. And I know the Red Rose Speedway box that had, I don't know how much, that had a lot of extra material, didn't it? Do you have that box set?
What, the Red Rose Speedway one?
Yeah.
No, no, it was just too pricey. I just I didn't get any of those ones when the price started going north of 100 quid.
Mhm.
Forget it.
Yeah. Okay. So after that,
It's
we
all,
got, oh,
it's
go
all
ahead.
available on Spotify anyway, so I'm aware of what the contents of
Hmm.
the archive edition. Just haven't bought it physically.
Yeah. Moving on to the second Starkey Poncia song, we've got Devil Woman. And this song kind of perplexes me a little bit because we have a song written not very well in Ringo's range. So this is an example I would put forth that Poncia is, I just think this is a terrible collaboration and the worst collaboration musically of the decade. I think he brings almost nothing to Ringo. And I think they got lucky with Oh My and then tried to build some kind of partnership on it. This song, it's got its moments, but it's about based on four notes. It's not very complicated, and somehow those four notes are not all in Ringo's range. So I don't know what they were thinking. The lyrics are horrible. I mean, these lyrics make McCartney's lyrics look like Dylan by comparison. So if you're going to bring out a writer, why not bring in somebody that can either has some better lyrics or suits your style of singing?
Okay, so the case for the defense. Well, I agree with you. I think the lyrics are pretty awful, to be honest. But Jimmy Calvert does a nice guitar solo. Um, I love Richard Perry's bass when he goes, yeah, in the middle of the song. I think that's very effective. He does that on a track on Goodnight Vienna all by myself as well. And he'd done it on Nielsen tracks as well. I think it's a very effective thing. This song has energy, good drumming from Ringo and Jim Keltner. Oh, actually, it just says Ringo on drums for this song on his own. So that's interesting. No, because he's playing with Jim Keltner on most of the tracks, is he or not?
Well, one thing I can tell you, and one of the things that I think makes this album special in Ringo's canon, if you want to call it that, this is
Yeah.
one of the only albums where he plays drums on every track. So I think there's one or two other albums he does, but he typically has a guest drummer like Keltner helping him out and supporting. But if he's playing drums on every track, that tells me he's taking a little bit more attention to the detail, and it gives it a different feel. Um, Keltner has never been a guy. I don't have anything bad to say about Keltner, but to me, he's just a typical studio drummer that doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't have anything personal about it. I don't hear his playing say, "Oh, that's Jim Keltner." It's more. He's more of a session style guy that's a little more even. So anytime I can hear Ringo's drums, I find that just more life giving, and I think that's what gives this album a little bit of a lift, even though Kellner plays on it throughout. Let's see if it
Well,
says here.
have you got the album in front of you there, Matt?
I
Because
do.
in this Terry Wilson book, Jim Keltner's not mentioned, so maybe I got it wrong.
Well, Kellner's mentioned he plays on 5 tracks. So
Oh,
let's see here. I got to do some math here. Devil Woman is song 9. He is listed on Devil Woman. He's
well, I
listed.
wonder why Mr. Wilson left him out. Oh no, Jim Keltner drums. Okay, sorry, he's just listed further down, which is a bit confusing. Okay, yeah, no, yeah, I think Jim Keltner's playing. I don't know if you want to call it backup drums or just whether they played jointly together, or I'm not sure if one of them laid down a part and then the other one overdubbed something on top of it. I'm not sure how that worked in the studio.
Yeah, it's
Um,
always perplexed me too. How do you lay down who's playing on the basic track? Is it separated and does it get removed? Or, I mean, Ringo's a fine drummer. And that's another thing I think about Ringo's solo career. He didn't really play to his instrument. You know, like I said, and there's some albums he doesn't play drums at all on. I think that's a mistake. And he could have spent time in his solo career to continue to improve at his drumming, but that wasn't his thing. Same thing with Harrison, his guitar playing. They're kind of similar. Actually, none of the Beatles solo stuff, they really focused on their instrumental chops. Even McCartney, I thought was lax. He's by far did the best in the 70s, and the Band on the Run album is evidence of that. But generally, I think they were more trying to be songwriters.
yeah, well, the only albums I can think of where Ringo doesn't drum are the first two. Um, I think he was drumming on all the others, albeit with someone else, like Steve Gadd on Ring of the Fourth or Jim Keltner on some of the others. I think on
I,
Bad Boy he's on his
yeah,
own.
I think there's some tracks on those later albums, like every album after this, where there's some tracks he doesn't play on. So he does play on those albums, yes. But I think Bad Boy, he might play in every track. I forget. I
Yeah,
did
no,
that.
he's the only drummer on Bad Boy. Bad Boy is one of those annoying albums where the musician credits are given in disguise. So you've got guitar playing guitar,
Hmm.
and I think there's a code name for Dr. John on keyboards. I forget what it was, but I'd managed to figure that one out.
Hmm.
But at least on this album, we get musician credit, so we get to see who's playing on everything, which I love, and that's what we're missing on a lot of solo albums. You had that for Red Rose Speedway, you had that for Imagine, you had that for Walls and Bridges, and uh, but you didn't have it for Mind Games. You didn't have it for um, Band on the Run or Venus and Mars. But so I like it when you get detail like that. I think it's excellent.
Yeah, I do too. It shows particularly the horn players, and I never would have thought he. It doesn't sound like there's two drummers, but I don't know how they did that, but yeah, I appreciate that. And the album itself, mine's pretty beat up here. I've had this for a long time, but it came with this booklet that
Yeah,
had all these drawings and and all the lyrics. Not that we want to see, Vinnie Poncio's lyrics don't translate to the page very well, but you get to see them here and read them if you like. But it's a very elaborate package.
was that not stapled into the gatefold for you then?
This gatefold is so beat up that no, there's no staple here. So this is the inside of the gatefold, and whoa, here we go. No staple marks there. Mine was on the inside with the record, and
But is that a new vinyl or a secondhand copy you've
this
got
is
there?
yeah, secondhand. So this is the old. It's an original.
And it's a US pressing, is it?
Yes, and I always thought this was kind of a neat logo Ringo did.
Yeah, I thought that's good. Yeah.
Well, in the Apple's '70s days, I thought they did some unique things with the labels, and I thought this was a great label. He was really kind of branding himself a bit, but he didn't take it much farther than this as far as branding goes, because I thought he could have parlayed this album and had some kind of very good, maybe perhaps television career. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, well, certainly in England, the booklet was stapled in the middle, and I know for the new vinyl edition, it's not. It's like the one you showed me there. It's just included. But Klaus Voormann is just a superb artist. I wish he'd done more cover artwork, really, because he's only done,
Oh
as far as
yeah,
I know, he's only
and
done Revolver and this and the anthology, really.
I know that this album was delayed because they were waiting for the artwork. Because I mean, it's very intricate. It's kind of Sergeant Peppery with all.
Actually, yeah, Klaus doesn't do the front cover. It's someone else. His name escapes me now.
What did Klaus do on this? He
He,
have a
he
hand.
did he did the lithographs to illustrate each song.
Okay, yes, yes. Let me just show the audience. So these lithographs are quite they're all black and white. I don't know, they're like I think they're pencil drawings, maybe charcoal. I'm not sure how he did it, but they are very interesting and quite elaborate. So I think that was Ringo knew he had something special here and really did go all out for the cover. And the three other Beatles are on here, and all the people playing on here are featured in here. I obviously this cover, it looks extremely glitzy, extremely glammy, extremely Vegasy, and it looked like Ringo was ready to like branch out and either do Vegas or television or something, and nothing came of it really. And if you said that one promo video from Photograph, maybe that turned people off. I don't know.
Well, looking at your copy of the album, whoever owned it must have looks like he played it to death because
Yeah,
it's got ring wear on it.
I
So
bought this. I don't even remember how I bought this. Probably it's been 30 years ago, but it does have ringware, and like a
yeah,
lot of well-played '70s albums, it's got seam splits and the whole thing.
yeah, I tried to spot as many people as I could in the crowd there, but I gave up after about 10 people. But
Yeah,
I even did some research on it online at one stage. I mean, there's every member of the band is on there. Um, Billy Preston is recognizable, Nicky Hopkins, Klaus. Um, but then there's some obscure sort of clown and people dressed as Frankenstein and stuff.
yeah. I
So
think that he could have done away with all those people in the background. I mean, the main thing is this front. I think this is totally Ringo, and I think that's all you really needed. But he was going all out, and
well, it's a bit of a homage to Sergeant Pepper, isn't it?
yeah,
I think
I
it's
think
quite
so.
nice.
I thought so. And I
Yeah,
think that he maybe overdid it a bit, but that was the 70s. If you can remember the 70s, the platform shoes were higher and the width of the pants on the bottom were wider, and everything was just exaggerated. So that was we were just finishing up Devil Woman there, and you had mentioned the guitar player on that song. That does have some very fine guitar, and I think I know Robbie Robertson and Harrison may play on that track, but you said who's the lead guitarist on that one?
Jimmy Calvert.
Jimmy Calvert. Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Let me just look at the back here. Yeah, he's the only guitarist listed on that track.
yeah.
So
Robbie Robertson, I don't think does any solos apart. He's on the Sunshine Life for Me track,
mm,
and he famously does the solo on Snookeroo on the following album, Goodnight Vienna. But I don't think he's on it. I don't think he plays any other solos here.
yeah, Ringo really got along well with the guys from the band, and he kind of had his buddies. I think the band, those guys, I think who wouldn't want to hang out with Ringo? So I think they took to Ringo as well. Even up through like the very first concert I saw of any Beatle was his All Star Band, and was it 92, 90, 89? I can't remember what year.
Yeah,
But several members of the band, Rick Danko, Levon Helm, I think maybe even Garth Hudson was with him. I can't remember now.
but you were not in the front row shaking hands with them.
No, I was in the grass seats way in the back, and it was raining. Still a
Okay.
great show because that show had let's see, Nils Lofgren and Joe Walsh, Dr. John. Oh man, who else? It was just talk about, and I took for granted in those days. Oh yeah, this is cool, but what an ensemble, what a
Yeah,
fun.
I tend to find that whole concept a bit annoying, really. I mean, I know it commercially it pays for the tour and people buy tickets because there's a multiple people on offer, but if I had my way, I would want 100% solo Ringo concert with him
Yeah.
doing stuff from his solo albums, but that's just maybe not going to work commercially, so that's why he hasn't done it.
Well, I think it would have worked for at least one tour. I mean, what Beatle doesn't draw? I mean, I would have loved to hear a song. He just when Ringo would do the All Star Band, I'm trying to think. He'd only do maybe three Beatles songs, if that, maybe four, and then he would do just four or five solo songs. Then everybody else takes their turn. But yeah, I would have loved to hear Ringo do a whole concert of his material.
Yeah,
He could have
I
done
mean,
it.
it's a bit like McCartney, isn't it? Because he's played, say, Hey Jude so much over the years that one doesn't really want to ever hear it again. And it's the same with Little Help from My Friends, and to an extent, Photograph as well. You know, Ringo's done it every single time,
Yeah.
and he just there's no variation in the set list. You know, whereas Neil Young or Bob Dylan will change it with every tour. And and I don't want to hear Ringo sing Yellow Submarine either, to be honest with you. I
Oh,
think it was who was it? Todd Rundgren was saying, "Yeah, I did the Ringo tour because you can't say no to Ringo. On a good night, I was bored 50% of the time. On a bad night, I was bored the whole time."
yeah.
Something like that.
John, I think you and me and a lot of our viewers here are probably in a minority where when we go to a show like that, we don't need to hear the hits. But when I look around me, and I've been at several Ringo shows, I remember being at one in particular, and the guy I was with was not a big music fan. And when Yellow Submarine came on, he just sang his guts out. People want to hear the hits. And I think a lot of us that are a little more a different kind of fan would prefer to hear some obscure stuff. And the very good artists sprinkle in some of that for people like us. And maybe there was just no room to do that on this all-star format, which I think was sad. I mean, Ringo could have done a song like Step Lightly. That would have been great. Nobody would, the people that didn't know that song wouldn't have cared. And those of us would have been thrilled, would have praised him for it and thought, well, he's given us a little something extra.
Yeah, and I think now he's sort of reached a ripe old age. What maybe it's the time to do another standards album because it's more relaxed for him to sing that kind of song. Presumably, you don't have to do rock and roll songs the whole time.
Yeah, how
Seems
long
to
ago
be-
was that when Rod Stewart did that first Standards album that went over so huge? I think he did a volume two and probably a volume three. That's maybe 10 years ago. I
Yeah,
thought that that would have been a time
he was the one who started the sort of renaissance of that style of thing, right? But Ringo was the first, I think, to do it out of anyone because he did it right at the beginning of the 70s. But trying to think who else did it around that time. I think, yeah, the Rod Stewart one was. I didn't buy it, so I don't know what year it's from, to be
only
honest.
person I can think that was doing it around sentimental journey time, and this is somebody that I want to parallel with Ringo, is Cass Elliot. So the Mamas and Papas, they delved into a little of the old standards with Dedicated to the One I Love and Dream a Little Dream of Me. And Cass, Mamas and Papas had a big hit with both of those songs. And then Cass Elliot built a career on standards. And then she became a television personality as well. I'm surprised that Ringo didn't take a similar approach or wasn't approached to go in that direction because I think he would have been great at it. All these people, especially in America, the variety show was still big, and you had people with marginal talent doing these shows. Look at Sonny Bono, for God's sakes. I mean, he could barely he was barely a better singer than Ringo, and they had a whole variety show. Of course, he had a wife that was a looker, but I thought Ringo really could have been a bigger star. And it seems like this was kind of this was the high point. It was downhill from here, both musically and on film and television.
I just remembered that Harry Nilsson did a little touch of Schmielsen in the Night in '73, so that was not so long after Sentimental Journey, and that was all standards. But that album left me a bit cold, to be honest. It's a little bit too schmaltzy for me. But
As far as Nilsson goes, I've really gotten into his 60s stuff a lot. And as he gets into the 70s, he loses me a little bit. I think because I, he did that Randy Newman album and he started doing covers. And I don't know. I agree with you.
I like Nielsen Smielsen and Son of Schmielsen, and I like Pussycats. I just don't particularly like that standards album in between. But that's just me.
Yeah, Nilsson is, I think he's more of his 70s stuff. Obviously, he had big hits. And talk about, he had a novelty song as well. But I don't find he's more of like a Randy Newman, like a niche following or a cult following almost. I don't know. He
When
does
you
his
say novelty song, you're referring to Coconut, are you?
best.
Okay, just
And
checking.
people, that's what, yeah, I should clarify. I shouldn't assume everybody knows. But as great as Nilsson was, I think he kind of lost his way a little bit. And I don't mind a humorous song now and then. And as novelty songs go, that's kind of a fun one. But it just was just a trend.
Yeah, I mean, I've got all of his '70s albums. I think the last one he did in 1980 is pretty poor, but That's the Way It is nice. Nice cover of That Is All, the George Harrison track, and the Nielsen is called Knielsen, I think. The one from '77 is a delightful sort of laid back, late night, turn the lights down low kind of album. Very nice.
Well, I know that Nielsen had some substance abuse problems, and I think as the 70s wore on and the booze and the cocaine started to take its toll on these guys. I mean, Ringo, I know he was, I don't know when his drinking problem actually became a problem. That's kind of unknown to me. But clearly in the 70s, I think he relied less on what he could bring talent wise to his recordings and relied on others. So I think that's always evident in Ringo stuff and maybe in Nilsson as well. Harrison a little bit too. He had some problems with some substance abuse and got sick. He got hepatitis, Hep C. So that happened in the decade of excess following the '60s.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate with Ringo because you can't really ask him about that second half of the '70s because he literally can't remember half of it. And even though, I think he put out some good stuff and I've got the book by Nancy Andrews his girlfriend for the last 5 years of the 70s, and there's some great pictures of them traveling around the world. And there's one great picture of Nancy, Ringo, Paul, and Linda walking through the streets of Manhattan in '77, I think it was. So there's all this lost years, which Ringo says we've got the record, and that's about it. Other than that, I couldn't tell you what happened.
And it doesn't sound like I never heard any of the other three Beatles suggest it was a problem. There's probably no intervention. I mean, obviously everybody was imbibing in those days. I mean, when you're young, your body can typically take it. But I mean, cocaine was a big, that was very prevalent, especially in the jet set rock star phase. So that'll take its toll too. But yeah, I don't know.
So I was listening to a radio interview with Ringo recorded in Monte Carlo in the middle of a pouring rainstorm in September '77, I think it was. And they were talking about the Ringo album and how John had written a track, and George turned up, and there were three of us in the studio. And the interviewer said, "And which track was that?" And Ringo said, "I can't remember." And he jokingly says, "Competition for you guys out there, who can name that track?" And it was just only 4 years after the event, and he can't remember "I'm the Greatest."
Wow.
I was staggered.
Yeah, I mean, what a time to be a rock star. Well, he killed Keith Moon, his buddy. I mean, people don't realize that Keith Moon technically died taking an overdose of medication he was using to combat his alcoholism.
Yeah,
And by the way, he was out to dinner with McCartney and his wife the night before that. So he's
yeah,
drinking with McCartney and he winds up dead the next morning.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've seen those pictures with Paul and Linda. Yeah, Buddy Holly event, I think it was.
Well, and Ringo, he didn't get dried out until I think 89. I mean, I know he had some recordings that remain, I think, unreleased, 87, 88 period. And he was in bad shape by then. And both he and Barbara, got dried out and they've been clean ever since. So I got to give him credit for, 30 plus years of sobriety. And
It's
he looks great.
Chips Moorman is the guy who produced the Lost album from '87. I've got a picture I can show you. One sec.
Yeah, while you're getting that, I do know that Ringo was also there was a wine cooler he was hawking on television. Which company was that? Wine coolers became the rage, and I think
Oh,
that
it
was one
was Sun Country
some
wine
country.
cooler.
So I think that ended up not being a good combination for taking the cure.
So this is a bit out of focus. This shot. Um, so this is Ringo with Hilary Gerard, his manager, in Kensington, December 1987. He was still drinking. We'd been advised not to approach him for autographs because he would get ratty. So I didn't. I left one of his albums, which is the one behind on the wall behind. Left it to be signed with his secretary and arranged to pick it up the following week. So when we met Ringo, I said, "When's your new album coming out?" And he goes, "Oh, in a few months." And that was this Chips Moorman album, which I have a bootleg of it, and it's not good. It's not good.
Never heard.
Even Bob Dylan's appearing on it as well, but does nothing to lift proceedings. It's got a version of "I Can Help," the old song. I can't remember who. I
Billy
can help.
Swan.
Yeah, I think so. Um, and it's got a version of "You Better Move On," the Arthur Alexander song, which is fairly interesting. But you could see why he didn't want it released.
So Ringo did autograph your album.
Yeah, yeah, I got it back, and he didn't just do the star sign. He did his full name, Ringo Starr. Shall I show it? What's that?
That album is one of my favorite Beatles solo album covers. And you can see, obviously, we're talking about Ringo being an alcoholic. He's got a nice drink on the cover,
You
probably.
see the signature there?
Oh yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So, these days, obviously, he doesn't even sign anything. So, in those days, I was lucky to get not only a signature, but a full the full name.
Mhm. Well, there's one song we haven't gotten to yet, and that's I call it it's Ringo's "A Day in the Life," and that's "You and Me, Babe." And this is one of my favorite moments of any Beatles solo song, just because as a fan, this is the mood I want to be put in when I listen to the solo Beatles more than any mood. And he nails it with "You and Me, Babe." And this is a Harrison Mal Evans song. Is that right?
Yep, I think it's the only one that we can think of that Mal Evans co-wrote with George or anyone else that I can think of. Maybe he wrote a song or two, which I can't remember, but good effort. And just a perfect end to the album. I don't know who was behind that idea of saying goodbye to everyone. Um, and the that though I may not be in your town, you know that I can still be found right here on this record spinning round. Just wonderful lyrics. Um,
Yeah. And Harrison totally understands the needs of Ringo and what kind of song is suitable for him, because he nails it here. I mean, we don't see that with the other guys. McCartney was such a prolific writer. He seems like he could have supplied Ringo with lots of songs, but he just didn't seem to have the touch in writing for Ringo that George had.
who's this? Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, Paul, is it prolific of a writer as he was? I would have thought he might have been able to come up with more. Maybe just wasn't his thing, but again, this always just begs the question of why didn't Ringo and George do more together? Because they seem like in lockstep on several of these songs. So I don't know.
Well, hold on, Matt. You've got to remember Paul wrote Pure Gold for Ringo on Rush Grabber, and he wrote Private Property and Attention on Stop and Smell the Roses. So there's three off the top of my head. Um, he could have written more, it's true. Um, but he did turn up and play bass on a few albums as well. Yeah, I get your point. I think George and Ringo were probably. I think Paul was just too busy with Wings, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Probably.
probably too busy, and I don't know where if Ringo started. He started living in the States. I don't know when he started living there full time, but that also probably made it difficult because Paul then had visa problems getting in to the States.
Well, Ringo was a bit of a globe trotter or whatever the word is. He was either in the States or he was in Monte Carlo or came back to England for Christmas and stuff. But he's never stayed in one place for long, is what the impression I got of him in the 70s anyway.
And I think it's worth saying to kind of match up what I said earlier. He was living the total rock and roll lifestyle in the '70s, and I think that the lifestyle was more of a focus than his music or his career, because I think we start to see he might have been an all-star rock star, but after this album, like I said, was a downhill slide creatively in every aspect of his game.
Yeah, well, I know that's your particular view. I think his slide happened after Time Takes Time for me. I think up until Time Takes Time, I don't have a problem with any of his albums. Obviously, there's the odd clunker like the Back Off Boogaloo redone on Stop and Smell the Roses, which is just awful. Um, but yeah, no, I think pretty decent.
Well, I appreciate your charity on saying that his slide didn't start till '92. I disagree. I think obviously the trilogy of Goodnight Vienna, Roderick Reviewer, and the fourth, there's certainly a downward slide there. I think Bad Boys is not that bad of an album, even though it's the disco part of it is not suited to him very well. And Stop and Smell the Roses has some good stuff on it as well. How do you like the New Wave album, the album that really wasn't released in the States or the UK? I mean, he was at the point where he couldn't get a record contract or get something released even in the biggest markets in the world.
I think you mean the Old Wave album, right? Which is
The
a
old
pun
wave,
on New Wave.
yes,
You said
old.
New Wave.
Yes. I beg your pardon. I don't have that. I've
It's
never
uh,
listened to
it's a decent album. Well, side one is decent. Side two just goes downhill after the first two tracks, rather disastrously. But Joe Walsh is producing. there's some great choices of material, like She's About a Mover. I keep forgetting. Couple of Ringo written tracks. Hopeless was great. In My Car, I think Joe Walsh wrote that with Ringo. Be My Baby. Yeah, it's a good album. I mean, obviously, between that album and 92, it was a 9 year gap. So I say the slide started after Time Takes Time. Obviously, there's no album between 83 and 92, so there's nothing to slag off or like. Um, but yeah, Old Wave is decent. I think it's better than Stop and Smell the Roses, actually.
Really? Okay. I considered Time Takes Time his kind of comeback album. And I wish that that album, not that this could have happened, but the quality of that album, he really could have used that in 1978. And it didn't come out till 1992. So there was no, he couldn't buy a hit from 1977. And he needed, I think, again, that whole novelty style of hit songs in the first half of the 70s. By the second half of the 70s, that was waning a bit. And that I've always been very disappointed with the Goodnight Vienna album. I think it's he tried to carbon copy the Ringo album. Starts off with a Lennon song. You got the novelty song, No song, and I just not that I mean the Ringo album is a lot to live up to. I grant you that, but I think that he started to copy himself and not really bring in the right people, you know. So, but
You like you like Snookeroo though, right?
that's all right. I mean, you can't go wrong with Elton and Bernie Taupin. I think that song's all right.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of it, but I can see what he was doing. You know, he started to rub shoulders with the rock stars of the day. He was a Elton John fan. He loved Elton John actually. In fact, I remember a quote. This was in the 21st century, maybe early on, and he said, I don't really listen to any much music. Well, early Elton John is about all I listen to, and even that I don't listen to that much. So, but I still listen to early Elton John, so I agree with him on how great that stuff is. But,
I don't know because he invited, like, for example, Roger Hodgson to join his all-star band, so that must have meant he'd done some listening to Supertramp, for example. Um, I can't believe he didn't listen to the Stones. Um, it's a bit like John saying the last Paul album I listened to was the one with the rose in his mouth. I don't believe that for 1 second.
Lennon was like obsessed with McCartney's stuff. And if you listen to the radio at all, McCartney was on the radio constantly in the 70s. I mean, he had hits constantly. So I think he was not being quite honest with that there.
Yeah, have you got the Lennon Letters, the one edited by Hunter Davis, where there's got all those shopping lists he does for Fred Seaman, and there's one from '79, and he's got back to the egg on the shopping list.
Yeah. I think that Lennon liked McCartney's work just fine. I mean, I don't think he would have kept buying it. I mean, yeah, he acted a little bit, not paranoid, but kind of approached McCartney. He was kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde the way he treated McCartney.
Yeah,
It's kind of weird, but how do we get on that? I got off
I'm
on.
not sure. I'm not sure. Matt, I was going to say before I forget, check out some of Ringo's better promo videos. There's one for Only You, where he's dressed up in the Goodnight Vienna suit on top of the Capitol Tower with Harry Nilsson.
Mm-hmm.
And there's three from Rotgravur, you Don't Know Me at All, Hey Baby, and I'll Still Love You. All recorded in Hamburg, just so you know. We've just done the research, me and James, so that's why I know off the top of my head.
That's actually quite extensive for him to do that many promo videos. That's a lot for one album.
Yeah, and actually, looking at it, 76 was a good year for Beatles promo videos because George did three for 33 and a third, and which were all pretty damn good videos, like this song, Crackerbox Palace, and True Love. Um, so when those three plus Ringo's three probably put 76 in pole position in terms of best years for promo videos from the next Beatles.
Yeah, and Paul had all that live stuff that was filmed, so a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, indeed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
This album ends with "You and Me, Babe," and it ends on a perfect note. And the nod, a little thank you to the ex-Beatles. It doesn't seem contrived. It just seems genuine and warm. And it's a nice stripped down song. He doesn't go with the massive production. So that's one of the reasons I really like this song. And the CD has three bonus tracks. The one is a B side. It's got Down and Out, which is a Ringo written song, solely written by him, which is a great rock song. It's stripped down rock song with Harrison on guitar, again
Yep.
without the bombastic production style.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a great solo and it's got a good hook. It's just it's a bit repetitive.
Yeah,
Doesn't There's no sign of a middle eight.
yeah, he's not big on the bridge or any of that, but it's Ringo, so we make allowances, don't we?
Yeah, no, it's decent. It's decent. I quite like the way they've tucked it into the side one of the CD as well, so that you can listen to it as part of the album. Certainly on my version of the CD, I think. Which one have you got? You think I think the first version had the bonus tracks at the end, and then a later one had Devil Down and Out as track 4.
Yeah, the 91 reissue had the bonus tracks were Don't Come Easy, early 1970, and the last one being Down and Out.
Right, tacked on at the end of the album, yeah?
Correct. Yeah.
Let me just check my CD.
I don't have it on CD, and I don't think I have. I got a couple Ringo CDs that best of. I should have brought it out for this video, but I don't have uh, this CD. So yeah, what does yours look like?
Yeah, I've got Down and Out as track 4 there.
Oh, I see. So they put it. So it was the B side of Photograph, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Is why they
So
put it.
they've got it following Photograph, which is quite the right place to put it, actually, I think. Um, and then, it don't come easy in early 1970. I'm not quite sure why they put tracks like that, which have nothing to do with the album. I guess it's to try and sell a few more copies of the CD.
It's a great listen, and it takes me back to the 70s every time I put it on, and it's beautifully dated, a dated sound that I like. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I'm not sure about, but and I haven't read, there's not a lot of biography information on Ringo Starr, but I'm just baffled that he may have been approached to do some kind of variety show. Because I'm going to just give you a quick list of some of the variety shows in the United States that were going on by people with marginal talent. We have Sha Na Na, we've got the Hudson Brothers, we have the Starland Vocal Band, even had their special. Paul Lynde, Linda Carter, Susan Anton, Cheryl Ladd. And then we had the bigger ones like the Dean Martin Show, Sonny and Cher. Of course, Carol Burnett was huge. Donnie and Marie, one of the biggest musical variety shows during the mid 70s, and Flip Wilson. Cass Elliot had a couple shows, so she was able to kind of parlay that old standards thing into something. And I thought Ringo would have slid in perfectly on this, and somehow it evaded him.
I think there's a lot of things with looking back, he could have done if he wasn't enjoying himself quite so much. Um, but that was the times, you can't wind back the clock. He did at least record more or less an album a year in those years. So, but yeah, I mean, he could have taken his acting career further or cabaret or gone in any number of directions like that. But I'm not sure. Would not be a bit sad to see Ringo end up doing cabaret, something a
Well,
bit.
Cabaret, yeah, I mean, I would not have liked to seen him in Vegas. Although the Beatles in the up to this point, they were not, they were still kind of new. I mean, the Beatles breakup was fresh, and I mean, they weren't going to go do the oldies thing yet.
Yeah,
The Beatles, there was a slight revival, obviously, in the Beatles in '74. The Red and Blue albums came out. This
yeah.
coincided with the '50s revival, so there was this revival spirit that Ringo, the standards might have fit into that, but cabaret, yeah, I don't think he had the material to do cabaret, but it's a slippery
But
slope.
you were talking about more doing variety shows, more TV work kind of thing.
Yeah, because he made several appearances on Laugh-In. He was seemed
Yeah.
comfortable in front of the camera. He's very amiable. If he had a scripted format, like I said, some of these variety shows I listed, some of these people aren't super talented, but I mean, it was just the format of the variety show was just still something for everybody. And Ringo was that. He had a little something for everybody. He was the everyman. So I'm a little surprised. I think you may be right that he may have been enjoying himself a little bit too much or globe hopping too much to really be pinned down to do a show, which would have kept him in Los Angeles year round, probably.
Yeah.
He wasn't.
Well, the two examples I can think of some kind of variety shows you're talking about from the ex-Beatles would be the James Paul McCartney thing from '73, which was okay in places, but like pretty embarrassing in others. And then the '78 TV special that Ringo did do to promote Bad Boy, um, the Ogna Rats special.
Yeah,
Oh,
I didn't like that. The James Paul McCartney thing. That's no that's no more cringy than any of these other variety shows. It's right in line. I thought that was fairly well produced. McCartney had a couple good ideas for that, and that would have, if he wanted to do a show, he could have done something, and that's something Ringo probably could have done and had his buddies come on help him and different things. Imagine the opportunities that would have been available had he had that, and asking his buddies to come and help him out. All the cool things that could have been done on camera, be they skits or just some live performances. There was a lot of directions he could have gone. And to fill a 50-minute show, I mean, it doesn't take that much.
well, you've got the promo videos. You can check them out, Matt, at least.
We have you and James Griffiths working on a book, so that's going to be great. I mean, I'm really excited to hear that. You're stepping out.
Yeah, it's been fun so far. I think it's going to get tougher when we get to the more recent stuff, which didn't sell and which is largely irrelevant, really, in the grand scheme of things. So I'm not sure how much enthusiasm we'll have left to review a Ringo video from last year, for example.
Well, the new stuff is, yeah, I mean, I listened to some of it here and there, but I made the comment recently on a recent video about the EPs he was doing, and I made the comment that Ringo never sounded better than now, and that's because of the auto tune. And people jumped on me. Well, everybody does auto tune. Yeah, I know they do, but I, to sound better than he sounded in his prime, I think that's really a little bit of a that's I have my limits. I find that to be beyond the pale. And he's 80 years old. I mean, I don't expect him to sound like 1972. So,
Yeah, well, he's doing a country EP next.
what is
Mm. The problem with EPs is they cost the same as a bloody album, and there's only 4 tracks on them.
I haven't noticed. I haven't bought those.
Well,
Let's
I buy everyone for completeness sake, you know me, but
buy them
it's
on.
getting
Are they available as a vinyl uh, issue or is it just CD?
the last two came out on 10-inch vinyl, which is quite a novelty, I suppose, but it's still, the best part of 20 quid. So, uh, anyway,
Well, I'm surprised he's still releasing stuff. Well, is he touring? Is he going to tour at all?
yeah, I think he's about to do a tour as we speak, actually.
Yeah, I haven't seen him in quite a long time. I think last time I saw him, I think Jack Bruce was still with him. If you can believe that. That goes back to the 90s, I think. Maybe.
So, what do you think this Steve Gadd concert's going to be next Sunday? Do you think he's going to do just his own stuff, or is he going to do like the Paul Simon tracks he played on and stuff like that? Do you think?
I know very little bit about it. What have you got on that?
Well, I don't know. He's named the members of his band. Michael Landau on guitar is pretty famous. Been on loads of records, and I can't remember the name of the bass player. But I would just love it if he did the stuff from Still Crazy After All These Years, or 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, or the tracks from One Trick Pony, Paul Simon as well, and Ringo the Fourth. He's not going to do tracks from Ringo the Fourth, but um, I'm going to take my copy of One Trick Pony and Ringo the Fourth to the theatre and try and get his autograph next to Tony Levin's.
I applaud your diligence, John.
Well, it's only three. The theatre they're doing it at is only 3 metro stops from where I live, so I've got very little excuse. The only problem is how to recognise Steve Gadd as he looks now versus how he used to look when he was doing Tug of War. It's a little bit different. So I have to study a few recent photos of him
Yeah,
to make sure I can recognise him. It'd be embarrassing if I go up to the wrong person.
yeah, very true. Because you're going to get an autograph probably from them.
Yeah, I find out I've got some bass player's autograph, and I thought yeah. No, I think he's quite distinctive looking. He's obviously got grey hair these days, but I won't make that mistake.
All right, John. Well, this was another great discussion. I always appreciate getting together with you.
Okay, it's been fun. Thanks a lot, Matt, and we'll see you next time.
Well, it's the end of the night. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone involved in this piece of plastic we're making.